Lewis Hamilton crossed the Suzuka finish line and immediately asked his team a question that still has no public answer. Why did his Ferrari produce less power than Charles Leclerc's on the same day with the same engine on the same track? The radio went silent, the engineers stayed quiet, and in the 72 hours since that race, a single frame of onboard footage has emerged that changes how we understand what really happened. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. The data tells a completely different story. Hamilton's rear rain lights, which flash when the car is harvesting energy, stayed active for 0.8 seconds, longer than Leclerc's on the critical straight where positions are won and lost. That fraction of a second in harvesting mode meant less electrical deployment when it mattered most. Oh, and it correlates directly with the 0.3 per lap deficit that dropped Hamilton from 3rd to 6th in the final stint. What no broadcast covered is this: the gap was not about raw power, it was about timing. And that is where this story gets complicated, because if the problem was timing, not hardware, then the solution lies in how a driver manages energy under pressure at 300 kilometers per hour. The 2026 regulations have turned every straight into a negotiation between instinct and calculation, and Hamilton is learning that system while racing for a championship. The question now is whether he can adapt fast enough, or whether the margin for error has already disappeared. This is the part that changes everything, and to understand why, we need to look at the hidden lap that no one saw coming. Lap 42 at Suzuka's turn 1 is where the mystery becomes visible. Charles Leclerc swept past Lewis Hamilton on the outside, and the onboard cameras captured something the live broadcast never highlighted. Hamilton's rear rain lights kept flashing well past the point where Leclerc's had gone dark. That visual signal means one thing: the Ferrari on Hamilton's back was still recovering energy while Leclerc's was already pushing full power down the straight. But if both drivers had the same car and the same system, why did one choose to harvest longer than the other? The numbers behind that moment tell the real story. Hamilton's lights flashed from 287 kilometers per hour to 312 kilometers per hour, while Leclerc is cut off at 295 kilometers per hour. That 0.8 second difference in harvesting mode translated directly into the 0.3 per lap deficit that Live Timing recorded. What the data actually shows is that Hamilton's harvesting window was 18% longer than Leclerc's on long straights, a pattern that repeated across all 3 races this season. And that is where this story gets complicated, because harvesting longer recharges the battery, but it costs immediate speed, and in 2026 that trade-off can decide a podium. Nico Rosberg put it plainly after Suzuka: the new system punishes hesitation. You have to commit to deploy or harvest. There is no middle ground. Hamilton's steering wheel inputs show he pressed the deploy button later than Leclerc on corner exit, a tiny delay that compounds lap after lap. If a 0.3 second error per straight becomes a 2.1 second deficit over a stint, that is enough to lose 3 positions without a single mistake in the corners. So the question shifts from what happened on lap 42 to who controls the decision to harvest or deploy. And that answer leads us into the hidden rules of the 2026 overtake mode. The 2026 regulations have replaced the old DRS with something far more complex. Overtake mode now activates only when a driver sits within 1 second of the car ahead, unlocking an electrical boost worth 85 brake horsepower for 12 seconds. That is not a minor adjustment, it is a complete rewrite of racecraft. Charles Leclerc understood this at Suzuka when he deliberately let George Russell pull ahead through the chicane just to stay inside that 1 second window and trigger the boost into turn 1. But if the system rewards patience over aggression, what happens to a driver who has spent 20 years maximizing attack? James Allison, Mercedes technical director, described the new demand perfectly. The 2026 cars require a new kind of race IQ, fast calculations at 300 kilometers per hour. The power unit now splits output evenly: 500 brake horsepower from combustion and 500 brake horsepower from electricity, a massive jump from the previous 160 brake horsepower electrical limit. That means energy is no longer a supplement, it is half the car, and the driver, not the pit wall, now controls when to deploy it. What no broadcast covered is this: Leclerc's tactical surrender was not weakness, it was a calculated trade, giving up a corner position to gain a straight line advantage worth 0.4 seconds per lap. The championship implications are immediate. After 3 races, Leclerc holds 34 points to Hamilton's 33, a 1-point gap that could widen if the energy management learning curve favors one driver. Mercedes has already won all 3 season openers, with George Russell in Australia and Kimi Antonelli, the rookie sensation, in China and Japan. The qualifying gap sits at 5 to 7 tenths, a deficit Ferrari cannot ignore. And that is where this story gets complicated, because if Leclerc has mastered the system in 3 races, why is Hamilton still searching for the rhythm? And what does that mean for the battles ahead? The answer lies in 2 very different approaches to the same machine. Lewis Hamilton has built his legacy on instinct, on attacking every corner at the limit, on trusting the car to deliver when he demands power. But the 2026 regulations reward a different skill set, one that values patience over aggression, calculation over instinct. Charles Leclerc has adapted to that demand in just 3 races, while Hamilton is still finding the rhythm. Inside the garage, engineers note Hamilton's steering wheel deploy button presses are 0.2 seconds later than Leclerc's on corner exit. That tiny delay seems small until you multiply it across a full stint. The sector data from Suzuka reveals the trade-off. In Sector 2, Leclerc gained 0.2 seconds in the corners, but lost only 0.1 seconds on the straights. Hamilton gained 0.1 seconds in the corners, but lost 0.4 seconds on the straights when his harvesting window extended. Fred Vasseur addressed the gap directly after the race. Lewis is learning. Charles has had 2 years with this philosophy. Here, we support both, but support does not change the championship math. If Hamilton's adaptation curve extends to Miami, the 1-point gap could become 15 or more by the mid-season break. What the data actually shows is that adaptation speed may matter more than raw pace in 2026. Hamilton's strength remains undeniable. His corner entry speed, his tire management, his racecraft and wheel-to-wheel combat are still among the best on the grid. The SF26 chassis plays to those strengths, carrying him through the technical sections with confidence. But when the straight begins and the energy deployment decision arrives, the advantage shifts. Because if the hardware is equal and the system is the same, then the gap comes down to a choice made in a fraction of a second. To understand why that choice matters so much, we need to look beyond the driver and at the machine itself. Mercedes has won all 3 opening races of 2026, and the reason is not just strategy or tire management. The W16 power unit delivers electrical energy all the way to the braking zone, while Ferrari's SF26 runs out of deployment with 200 meters of straight still remaining. That early clipping costs 0.3 seconds on every long straight, a deficit that no amount of driver brilliance can recover in the moment. But if the hardware gap is this clear, why has Ferrari not spoken about it more directly? The championship math makes the problem urgent. A 0.3 second loss per lap over 53 laps at Suzuka equals 15.9 seconds total, enough to drop a driver 3 to 4 positions regardless of racecraft. Toto Wolff addressed the advantage without gloating. We have optimized deployment for the new rules. Others are still finding the balance. What the data actually shows is that Ferrari's power unit runs 3.2% less total energy per lap than Mercedes, a gap that qualifies them for a mid-season upgrade under FIA provisions. And that is where this story gets complicated, because if the fix is coming in Miami, what happens to the title fight in the 4 races between now and then? Kimi Antonelli, the rookie who has already claimed 2 wins, benefits from that Mercedes straight-line strength just as George Russell did in Australia. Lando Norris's late pass on Hamilton at Suzuka was enabled by McLaren's access to competitive power, not just Hamilton's energy timing. Ferrari is working on an electronic reconfiguration of the hybrid system. And a redesigned unit is already on the dyno at Maranello, but until that upgrade arrives, Hamilton and Leclerc will keep fighting each other for 3rd while the silver cars pull away. To understand how Ferrari plans to close that gap, we need to look inside the garage where the real work is happening. Ferrari's response to Suzuka is already in motion behind closed doors at Maranello. A new electronic mapping of the hybrid system targets 5% more electrical energy retention for late race deployment, a critical adjustment for tracks like Suzuka where long straights punish early clipping. What no broadcast covered is this: Hamilton will have a new race engineer from the Miami round onward, a specialist in energy strategy who understands the 2026 driver burden better than anyone. But if the fix requires both hardware and communication changes, which one matters more for the next 4 races? The championship calendar adds urgency. Races 4 through 7 include Miami, Imola, Monaco, and Barcelona, with 2 high-speed circuits where Ferrari's power deficit hurts most. If Hamilton's adaptation lags, he could lose 20 points or more before the mid-season break. Laurent Mekies, who left Ferrari for Racing Bulls, warned about the risk. Mid-season power unit upgrades are high risk. risk, get the calibration wrong, and you lose reliability. Ferrari Tifosi can take hope from the aggressive timeline, but hope does not change the points table, and that is where this story gets complicated. Hamilton's 2025 season still casts a shadow, 0 podiums, an 86-point deficit to the championship leader. Oh, and a qualifying head-to-head record of 19-5 in Leclerc's favor. The team is balancing short-term results with long-term adaptation, and the Miami engineer changed signals they see driver-side optimization as the immediate priority. But all of this leads back to the question Fred Vasseur never fully answered in front of the cameras. Was Suzuka a one-off or a symptom of something deeper? To find that answer, we need to decode what was said and what was not. Lewis Hamilton asked a direct question after Suzuka. Same car, same engine. Why less power? Fred Vasseur answered with technical detail about overtake mode and proximity thresholds, but he never confirmed whether both Ferraris produced identical output. That gap between explanation and confirmation is where the real story lives. Hamilton's question was professional, not emotional, and it deserves a professional answer, but here is what the paddock is not talking about. The silence itself tells you something about what Maranello is still working through. Martin Brundle put it plainly after the race. In Formula 1, what isn't said often speaks louder than what is. Vasseur's caution suggests the engineering debrief is still underway. Ferrari's internal cycle takes 72 hours for initial data and up to 2 weeks for deep analysis, meaning Suzuka conclusions may not be public until Imola. If Ferrari confirms a power unit deficit, expectations reset for the next 5 races. If they deny it, pressure mounts on Hamilton to adapt faster. What the data actually shows is that both answers carry consequences. Inside Maranello, the debate isn't about who is right, it is about how fast they can fix both sides. Did driver adaptation and power unit output? The championship thread runs through every decision. A confirmation changes strategy, a denial changes expectations, and that is where this story gets complicated, because the answer Vasseur did not give may matter more than the one he did. To understand what happens next, we need to look beyond Suzuka and at the title fight that awaits. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc sit separated by a single point after 3 races, 34-33, but the gap that matters now is not on the scoreboard. It is in the timing of a button press, the calibration of a hybrid map, and the speed of adaptation to a system that rewards calculation as much as courage. Mercedes leads the championship with George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, the rookie who has already claimed 2 wins. While Ferrari fights to close a power deficit that costs 0.3 seconds on every long straight. But here's what the paddock is not talking about. The next 4 races could decide whether Hamilton's Ferrari chapter becomes a resurgence or a footnote. The metric to watch is simple. If Hamilton's deploy button timing delta narrows to under 0.1 seconds compared to Leclerc by Miami, the adaptation is working. If it stays wider, the 1-point gap could become 20 or more before the summer break. Fred Vasseur summed up the team's position without flinching. We have 2 exceptional drivers. Our job is to give them equal tools. The rest is racing. What the data actually shows is that equal tools require equal understanding, and understanding takes time that the championship does not freely give. Hamilton's legacy stakes are real. At 41, every season carries weight, and mastering the 2026 energy system could define how his Ferrari story is remembered. The SF26 corners with brilliance. The chassis is among the best on the grid, but until the power unit delivers to the braking zone like the Mercedes, every straight becomes a test of damage limitation. Suzuka did not expose a broken car, it revealed a new kind of race. And in 2026, the champion will not just be the fastest driver, they will be the smartest energy manager on the grid.